Welcome back, everyone. We're going to be reading Five Nights at Freddy's The Twisted Ones. Now, we're just about fed up here because we've been having technical difficulties, but you're welcome to read along. We're at Chapter 5 now. Are you ready? Good. We are learning all the time. Hopefully at least some of you are learning right here in this class. Dr. Treadwell's students laughed nervously, but she continued over them. It had apparently not been a joke. When we learn, our minds must decide where we will store that information. Unconsciously, we determine what group of things is most relevant to and connected to that group. This is, of course, only the most rudimentary explanation. When computers do this, we call it information tree. Charlie was only half listening. She knew this already and was taking notes on autopilot. Since the expedition to Freddy's the day before, she hadn't been able to get the image of Dave's body out of her head, his torso and the gruesome lace of scars that covered it. When he was alive, he'd shown them off to her, boasting of his survival. Well, he never told her what had happened. It must have been an accident. He used to wear those suits all the time. She could see him now, before all the murders, dressed as a yellow bunny and dancing merrily with a yellow bear. She shook her head suddenly, trying to get rid of the image. "Are you okay?" Artie whispered. She nodded, waving him off. But the dead man in the field? That wasn't an accident. Someone forced him inside, but why? Charlie restlessly tapped her fingers on her desk. That will be all for today. Dr. Treadwell set down her chalk and stalked off the auditorium stage with a purposeful step. Her teaching assistant, a flustered graduate student, scurried forward to collect the homework. "Hey, do you have any time to go over some of this?" Artie asked Charlie as they gathered up their things. "I'm in a little bit over my head in this class." Charlie paused. She promised to make up her first date with John, but she wasn't meeting him for over an hour. Now that she'd been to Freddy's, Charlie almost felt like she was on familiar ground, even if it was soaked in blood. This lass needs help. "I have some time now," she told Artie, who lit up. "Great, thanks so much. We can go work over at the library." Charlie nodded. "Sure." She followed him across the campus, only half engaged as he explained his difficulties with the material. They found a table, and Charlie opened her notebook to the pages she'd taken down today, pushing them across so Artie could see them. "Actually, do you mind if I sit next to you?" he asked. "It's easier if we're both looking at the same thing, right?" "Oh yeah, boy, be obvious." "Oh yeah." Charlie pushed her notes back over as he came around and sat next to her, scooting his metal folding chair next to hers, just a few inches closer than she would have preferred. "So, where did you get lost?" she asked him. "I was telling you on the way over," he said with a hint of reproach in his voice, then cleared his throat. "I guess I understood the beginning of the lecture, when she was reviewing last week's material." Charlie laughed. "So basically you want a review of everything new from today." Artie nodded sheepishly. "I don't think Artie should be in college." Charlie started from the beginning, pointing at her notes as she went. As she flipped through the pages, she noticed her own scribbles in the margins. Charlie leaned in closer where the harsh outlines of rectangles lined the bottoms of the page. They were all colored in like slabs of granite. She stared at them with a sense of déjà vu. They were important. "I don't remember drawing that," she thought uneasily. Then, "It's just doodles. Everybody doodles." She turned to the next segment of the lecture, and a strange alertness rose on the back of her neck as if anyone might be watching her. There were more doodles in the margins of this page too, and the next one. All of them were rectangles. Some of them were large and some were small, some scribbled and some outlined in so solidly that her pen had wet the paper through and torn it. All of them were vertical, taller than they were wide. Charlie stared, tilting her head to see from different angles until something pinged inside her. "Sammy," she thought then, "is it you? Does this mean something I don't understand?" Charlie glanced at Artie. He was staring at the paper too. As she watched, he turned the page again. The next pages were the same. They were filled with neat, clear notes, but little rectangles were squashed into every available spot on the page, stuffed into the space between bullet points, crammed into the margins, and tucked away where lines came up short. Quickly, Artie flipped the page back. He looked up at her and smiled, but his eyes were weary. "Why don't you try the first problem here?" Charlie suggested. Artie bent over his worksheet. Charlie stared down at her notebook. Her mind kept returning to her father's house, and the shape she'd drawn only made the impulse stronger. "I have to go back." "Are you okay?" Artie leaned in cautiously. Charlie stared down at the notebook. Now that she'd noticed the rectangles, they seemed more prominent than the notes. She could focus on nothing else. "I have to go back." Charlie shut the notebook and blinked hard. She ignored Artie's question, shoving the notebook into her backpack. "I have to go," she said as she stood up. "But I'm still stuck on the first problem," Artie said. "I'm sorry, I really am," she called over her shoulder as she hurried away. She bumped into two people as she passed the circulation desk, but was too flustered to mutter an apology. When she got to the door, she stopped, her guts twisting. "There's something wrong." She hesitated, her hands suspended in the air as if something was blocking her path. She finally took hold of the knob and instantly felt her hand fuse to it, as if by an electrical current. She couldn't turn it, and she couldn't let go. Suddenly the knob moved on its own. Someone was turning it from the other side. Charlie yanked her hand away and stepped back as a boy with an enormous backpack brushed past her. Snapping back into the moment, she slipped out before the door could swing shut again. Charlie sped towards Hurricane, trying to calm herself as she drove. The windows were cracked open and the wind was rushing in. She thought back to Treadwell's lecture earlier in the week. At every moment, your senses are receiving far more information than they can process all at once. Maybe there was Audie's problem in class. Charlie gazed at the mountains ahead and the open fields on either side. Watching them go by, she began to feel some restraint had been loosened. She'd been spending too much time in her room or in class, and not enough out in the world. It was making her jumpy, exaggerating her natural awkwardness. She rolled her window down further, letting in the air. Over the field to her right, a few birds were circling. "No!" Charlie stopped the car. "Something is wrong." She got out, feeling ridiculous, but the last few days had put her on a hair trigger. The birds were too large. She realized they were turkey vultures, and some of them were already on the ground, cautiously approaching what looked like a prone figure. Could be anything. She leaned against the car. Probably just a dead animal. After another moment, she turned back towards the car in frustration, but didn't get in. It's not a dead animal. She clenched her teeth and started to spot the vultures were circling. As she got closer, the birds on the ground flapped their wings at the sight of her and soared away. Charlie dropped to her knees. It was a woman. Charlie's eyes went first to her clothing. It was ripped up just like the dead man Clayburg had shown her. She leaned in to check the woman's neck, though she knew what she would find. There were deep, ugly gouges from the spring locks of an animatronic suit. But before she could examine them closely, Charlie stopped, horrified. "She looks just like me." The woman's face was bruised and scratched, which obscured her features. Charlie shook her head. It was easy to imagine more of a resemblance than there really was. But her hair was brown and cut like Charlie's, and her face was the same round shape, with the same complexion. Her features were different, but not that different. Charlie stood up and took a deliberate step back from the woman, suddenly aware of how exposed she was in the open field. "Clay! I need to call Clay." She looked up to the sky, wishing for a way to keep the vultures at bay, to protect the body. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the dead woman. "I'll be back." Charlie started off to her car, then broke into a run, faster and faster across the field until she ran like something was right behind her. She got in and slammed the door, locking it as soon as she was inside. Panting heavily, Charlie thought for a second. She was about halfway between Hurricane and the school, but there was a gas station just down the road where she could call Clay. For a last glance at the spot where the body lay, Charlie pulled out onto the road. The gas station seemed to be empty. As she arrived, Charlie realized that she'd never actually seen anyone fueling up here. Is this a working gas station? The place was old and shabby, which she had noticed in passing, but she'd never stopped to look around. The pumps looked functional, though not new, and there was no shelter above them. They simply stood on concrete blocks in the middle of a gravel driveway, exposed to the weather. The little building attached to the gas station might once have been painted white, but the paint had worn down to reveal gray boards underneath. It seemed to be tilting slightly, slipping on its foundation. There was a window, but it was filthy, almost the same color gray as the building's outside walls. Charlie hesitated, then went to a door and knocked. A young man answered, about Charlie's age, wearing a St. John's College t-shirt and jeans. "Yeah," he said, giving her a blank stare. "Are you open?" "Yeah." He was chewing gum and wiped his hands on a grimy rag. Charlie took a deep breath. "I really need to use your phone." The boy opened the door and let her in. There was more space inside than she'd thought. Sounds like a TARDIS. In addition to the counter, there was a convenience store, though most of the shelves were empty, and the line of the refrigerators at the back was dark. The young man was looking at Charlie expectantly. "Can I use your phone?" she asked. "Phones for customers only," he said. "Okay." Charlie glanced back at her car. "I'll get gas on the way out." "Pump's broken. Maybe you want something out of the cooler," he said, nodding at a grimy freezer with a sliding glass top and a faded patch of red paint that might once have been a logo. "We've got popsicles." "I don't want—" "Fine, I'll take a popsicle," Charlie said. "Pick out any one you want." Charlie leaned into the cooler. Pale, glassy eyes stared back at her. Beneath them was a furry red muzzle, its mouth open and poised to snap. Charlie screamed and hurtled backwards, banging into the shelf behind her. Several cans fell off the shelf and rolled across the floor. The sound echoed in the empty space. "What is that?" Charlie yelled, but the boy was cackling so hard he was gasping for breath. Peering back inside, Charlie realized that someone had placed a taxidermic animal in the cooler. Maybe a coyote. Better a coyote than a fox, that's what I say. "That was great," he finally managed to say. Charlie drew herself up, shaking with rage. "I would like to use your phone now," she said coldly. The boy beckoned her to the counter, all smiles, and handed her a rotary phone. No long distance, though, he warned. Charlie turned her back and dialed, walking towards the cooler as the phone rang. She peered in the top, studying the stuffed animal from the high angle. "Clay Burke here." "Clay, it's Charlie. Listen, I need you to meet me. It's another—" She glanced at the young man behind the counter who was watching her intently, not trying to hide the fact that he was listening. "It's like that thing you showed me before, with the cows." "What? Charlie, where are you?" "I'm at a gas station a few miles from you. Looks like someone painted an outhouse." "Hey!" The boy behind the counter straightened for a moment, taking offense. "Right, I know where you're at. I'll be right there." There was a click from the other end. "Thanks for the phone," Charlie said begrudgingly and left without waiting for a reply. Charlie crouched again where the woman's body lay. She looked anxiously up the road for Clay's car, but it didn't appear. At least the vultures hadn't returned. "I could just stay in the car until he gets here," she thought, but Charlie didn't move from her spot. This woman had died horribly and been abandoned in a field. Now, at least, she didn't have to be alone. That's the first nice thing she's done this entire novel, I think. The more Charlie looked at her, the harder it was to dismiss resemblance. Charlie shivered, even though she was warm on her back. She was filling with a cold, crawling dread. "Charlie?" Charlie spun around to see Clay Burke, then sighed and shook her head. "Sorry, I got here as fast as I could," he said lightly. She smiled. "It's okay. I'm just on edge today. I think that's the third time I've jumped in the air when someone said my name." Clay wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on the body. He knelt carefully beside it, scrutinizing it. Charlie could almost see him filing away every detail. She held her breath, not wanting to disturb him. "Did you touch the body?" he asked sharply, not looking away from the corpse. "Yes," she admitted. "I checked to see if she had the same injuries as the man." "Did she?" "Yes, I know she was killed the same way." Clay nodded. Charlie watched as he got up and circled the woman, dropping down to look more closely at her head and again at her feet. Finally, he turned his attention to Charlie again. "How did you find her?" he said. "I saw birds, vultures, circling above the field. I went to check." "Why did you go to check?" His eyes were hard, and Charlie felt a trickle of fear. Surely Clay didn't suspect her. Why wouldn't he, she thought. Who else would know how to use the spring locks? I bet he could come up with a million theories about me. Twisted girl avenges father's death. Acts out psychodrama. Film at 11. She took a deep breath, meeting Clay's eyes. I checked because of the body you showed me. It was in a field. I thought it might be another one. She kept her voice as steady as she could. Clay nodded, still the expression slipping from his face, replaced by worry. Charlie, this girl looks like you, he said bluntly. Not that much like me. She could be your twin, Clay said. No, Charlie said more harshly than she intended. She looks nothing like my twin. Clay gave her a puzzled look, then comprehension dawned. I'm sorry, you had a twin, didn't you? Your brother. I barely remember him, she said softly, then swallowed. All I do is remember him. I know she looks like me, she added weakly. We're right near a college town, Clay said. She's a young white female with brown hair. You're not a rare type, Charlie, no offense. Do you think it's a coincidence? Clay didn't look at her. There was another body found this morning, he said. Another girl? Charlie drew closer. Yes, as a matter of fact. Been dead for a couple of days, probably killed 2 nights ago. Charlie looked down at him in alarm. Does this mean this is going to keep happening? Unless you think we can stop it, he said. Charlie nodded. I can help, she said. She looked again at the woman's face. She looks nothing like me. Let me go to her house, she added abruptly, seized by a sudden impulse to prove it, to gather evidence that she and the victim were not the same. What? Her house, Clay said, giving her a dubious look. You asked me to help, Charlie said. Let me help. Clay didn't answer. Instead, he reached into the woman's pockets one by one, searching for her wallet. Aren't they supposed to let people gather evidence first? Dear Lord. He had to move the body to do it, and jerked a little as he did, like a ghastly puppet. Charlie waited, and at last he came back with her wallet. He handed Charlie her driver's license. Wait, did Charlie just teleport away from him? Now I'm confused. Tracy Horton, she read. She doesn't look like a Tracy. Okay, I don't even know what that means. You got the address? Clay scanned the road for police cars. Charlie read it quickly and handed the license back. I'm going to give you 20 minutes before I radio this in, he told her. Use it? Oh, that's great detective work for you. Tracy Horton lived in a small house off a back road. Her nearest neighbor's house were visible, but Charlie couldn't imagine they would have heard her scream, if she managed to scream at all. There was a small blue car in the driveway, but if Tracy had been taken from her home, since presumably she hadn't just been wandering through the field, it could easily have been hers. Charlie pulled in behind the car and went to the front door. She knocked, wondering what she was going to do if someone answered. I really should have thought this through. She couldn't be the one to inform a parent, spouse, or sibling of the young woman's death. Why did I assume she lived alone? No one answered. Charlie tried again, and when there was still no response, she tried the door. It was unlocked. And I'm assuming she assumed the girl lived alone because nobody called the police, yeah? Charlie walked quickly through the house, not really sure where she was looking for. She glanced at her watch. 10 of the 20 minutes had passed just driving here, and she had to assume that the police would get here faster than she did. Why did I follow the speed limit the whole way here? The living room and the kitchen were clean, but they conveyed no information to her. Charlie didn't know what peach-painted walls said about a person, or the fact that there were 3 dining room chairs instead of 4. There were 2 bedrooms. One had the sterile air of a guest room that was slowly being taken over by storage. The bed was made and clean towels were folded on the chest of drawers, but cardboard boxes filled a quarter of the room. The other bedroom looked lived in. The walls were green, the bedspread pale blue, and there were piles of clothing on the floor. Charlie stood in the doorway for a moment and found she could not go inside. I do not even know what I'm looking for. This woman's life would be sifted through to the last grain by trained investigators. Her diary would be read if she had one. Her secrets would be revealed if she had any. Charlie didn't need to be a part of it. She turned and walked quickly but quietly back to the front of the house, almost running down the steps. Standing by the car, she checked her watch again. 6 minutes before Clay called in the body. Charlie went to the little blue car and peered inside. Like the house, it was neat. There was dry cleaning hanging in the back window and a half-empty soda in the cup holder. She walked all around it, looking for something. Mud in the tires, scratches in the paint, but there was nothing unusual. 5 minutes. She walked briskly through the unkempt grass that bordered the sides of the house. When she reached the backyard, she stopped dead. Before her were 3 huge holes in the ground. longer than they were wide. They looked like graves, but at a second glance they were too messy, their outlines too poorly defined. Charlie walked around them in a circle. They were lined up next to one another, and they were shallow, but the dirt at the bottom was loose. Charlie grabbed a stick off the ground and poked it in the middle hole. It went in almost a foot before it was stopped by denser soil. The dirt dug out of them was strewn messily all around. Whoever dug the holes had carelessly tossed it everywhere, not bothering to pile it up. 2 minutes. Charlie hesitated for another moment, then lowered herself into the middle hole. Her feet sunk into the loose dirt, and she fought to steady herself, catching her balance. It wasn't too deep. The walls came up to her waist. She knelt and put a palm against the wall of the grave. The hole, she reminded herself. The dirt was loose here too, and the wall was rough. Something had been hidden here, under the ground. The air is growing thin. I'm running out of oxygen, and I will die like this, alone in the dark. Charlie's throat seized. She felt as if she couldn't breathe. She climbed out of the hole and up onto the grass of Tracy Horton's backyard. Charlie took a deep breath, focusing all of her attention on pushing away the panic. When she was free of it, she checked her watch. -1 minute. He already called them. But something kept her there, something familiar. The loose dirt. Charlie's mind raced. Something climbed out of these. From a distance, a siren was wailing. It would be there in no time. Charlie hurried to her car and pulled out of the driveway, taking the first corner without caring where it would take her. The whole stayed in her mind. The image is like a stain. So there you have it. There is chapter 5. If you want us to continue, please let us know. We've been seeing reviews of the book, both good and bad, so we weren't sure if we should continue or not. But we hope you like what you saw. If you like what you see, like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.